jazz, etc. When did jazz start? Nobody knows the exact time and place when jazz started. However, the starting point of jazz genre is directly related with equality of human race. During 19th century, black people became more independent and obtained a little bit of freedom. In New Orleans, black people got freedom to use drums to play for voodoo rituals. The first jazz genre started when black drum beat met with European brass instruments. Branches of jazz music. Just because jazz music started in 19th century, it does not mean every genres and types of jazz music started in that time period. Gypsy jazz started in 1930s by guitarists. Bossa Nova started in 1930s by young Brazilians and became popular in 1950s. Jazz blues didn't spread out significantly until 1940s.
Musicians. So David Sanborn, he was introduced to the saxophone at the age of three? Yeah, for his polio. And then he went to Northwestern to study music at the young age of 14. And he was able to perform with legendary musicians Albert King and Little Milton. And then he decided to join a band called the Butterfield Blue Band, and he later toured with other musicians like Stevie Wonder. And then his solo release of Taking Off in 1975 solidified his career, and he won his first Grammy with that single. And he eventually released 24 albums, won 6 Grammys, and has 8 gold albums and 1 platinum album. So Miles Davis, his full name is he is Miles Davis III. He was born in 1926 to a middle-class household, and he was introduced to the trumpet at the age of 13. And then he started playing professionally in high school, and he eventually even played with people like Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker when he was just 17. And he later went to Juilliard, and he was part of multiple bands all throughout his life. And he also released this album called Kind of Blues, and is these days known as the most selling jazz album of all time. And he continued to succeed, earning 9 Grammys in total and a Lifetime Achievement Grammy Award. Lastly, Louis Armstrong. He was born to a really poor family, and then at a young age he went to jail for shooting a gun in the air during a New Year's Eve celebration. And when he went to the Colored Waifs Home for Boys, he picked up the cornet or the trumpet. They're pretty similar instruments. And then he fell in love with the instrument. And when he went back home, he was very determined to have a career in music. So he earned money on his own for his family. And then he eventually grew up very quickly, marrying at like a super young age. And then he eventually broke up with all of them. But then he stopped working jobs, and he was able to live off of music at a super young age. And he had many albums in his multiple bands, and his most famous for songs like Stardust, La Via and Rose, and What a Wonderful World. But he is simply not a band musician, or a trumpeter, but he sang, and he was an all-around musician, completely changing the genre of jazz.
So some characteristics of jazz include ragtime. It's a genre of jazz, and it's known as the precursor of actual jazz genre, and it usually consists of a lot of woodwinds and brass instruments, so usually band, and it's characterized by a lot of syncopation, and it's kind of in a form of march and waltz. So gypsy jazz is another genre, and it's a mix of American swing, French musette, and folk song atmosphere of the early Europe. And it mainly consists of guitars and string instruments, and it has a lot of improvisations and solos that go on chromatic scales and blues scales at a fast tempo. Bossa Nova is otherwise known as Brazilian jazz, and it usually consists of samba rhythms because it evolved from Brazil, and it consists a lot of 7th chords and usually has a faint trace of guitar in the background with piano as the main soloist. It has a slow tempo and a lot of drag to it, and it's also known as free jazz style. Smooth jazz evolves from a fusion of many different jazz styles, not only jazz, and it's very polished with little improvisation, and it's known as modern jazz to the point where some people disagree that it's a genre of jazz. And it's very full with simple arrangements, but it's very slow paced and it has a relaxing R&B feel with a lot of electronics in it. Some common jazz characteristics is swing rhythm, syncopation, improvisation, and typical instrumentation. Those are all the common characteristics of the genres that I mentioned.
So controversies about smooth jazz and why technically it's not jazz. The smooth jazz is a relatively contemporary genre, and some people argue that smooth jazz isn't really jazz because it defies every traditional elements of jazz, such as improvisation, swing, and blues chords. And it is very difficult to define smooth jazz and fit it into a category. But most people trust their ears and recognize the vibes that most jazz pieces give off, and thus categorize this genre as smooth jazz.
So for the instruments in jazz, for the soloist and vocalist, there's an instrument that usually plays the melody throughout the song, and it can be an instrument. And for the brass band, it is usually a jazz band consists of different brass instruments and a saxophone. For drums, they usually play a 4/4 rock beat to the slow tempo music. And for guitars, they can be a background or solo instrument of the smooth jazz piece. And lastly, for the piano and keyboards, it can be a background or solo instrument of the smooth jazz piece, often both at once in a single piece. Citation.
Miss Lee, do you want us to turn on the YouTube video or should we move on? Okay. We have the YouTube videos for the examples on there if you want to check.